1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Royal Blue Podcast sound check. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Blue Podcast. Podcast on what is an historic day for Everton Football Club. It's Thursday, we are live, and I am your host, Ian Croll. The news, the announcement has been confirmed. Farhad Moshiri's reign as Everton owner is over and a new era has begun. The Friedkin Group's takeover, namely Dan Friedkin, the American billionaire, has become the new owner of Everton Football Club. It is the breaking news everyone has been waiting for, and we are here to bring you live reaction throughout the day. Joining me in the Royal Blue studio to talk all things Everton, to talk all things takeover, we have Joe Thomas. Joe Thomas, how are things? All good?
Yeah, really good. Really good.
Busy this busy morning?
A reasonably busy morning. I think, everybody knew what was going to happen and roughly when. I think it was Monday morning I was writing that this was going to happen this week. So it's been fair to say we've had a bit of a run up to it. And as a result, to be honest, I've pre-written most of the pieces that have started to go out already upon the announcement. So was relatively well prepared. So busy, yes, not as busy as as have been at other times, but more than anything, just really, I've been doing this job about 2.5 years, and it's been so difficult. And so many of these emergency podcasts and things like that, and big sweeping statements, and it's all been negative, or there's been a lot of suspicion around who's been involved and the characters and things like that. And this one is all positive, and that is such a nice place to be.
Also joining us in the studio today, we have Matt Jones. Matt, how are things? All good?
Yeah, really good. Joe giving away the secrets of journalism there and how it all works.
Yeah.
Getting to prepare stuff, but no, relieved, mate. Very relieved. It feels like it's been a long road to this point, doesn't it? Just reading some of the stuff that Joe has filed today and some of the reaction, and thinking about some of the low points we've had over the past couple of years, where it felt like this day would never come really, and we'd be kind of trapped in this misery cyclone for a while, and to be out of it on the other side of it, big deep breath, and hopefully we can move forward from here.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go through a bit of a deep dive, but good to have you on the pod, Matt. Obviously, a rare appearance from you. You only seem to come on when it's the big ones, don't you?
I mean, I don't know if I've planned that. Well, apparently Joe's never here for the big ones. We were just discussing before we went on there.
Allegations there against Joe. That's Chris Beasley. That's just, don't shoot the messenger. That was what Chris Beasley said.
Where's he?
Exactly. Exactly.
But no, good to be here.
Good stuff. Okay, well, usual plugs and promos. Give this video a thumbs up, drop us a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Your support, as always, is greatly appreciated. We are live, so get your comments in on the stream, and we will start reading them out. I mean, you give your initial reaction there, Joe. I think it was interesting today, and maybe a little bit poignant as well, that outgoing owner Farhad Moshiri has also given a statement as well. For some reason, I wasn't expecting a statement from Moshiri. I thought he'd kind of just move into the backdrop. But what have you made of that statement? And we've talked about Moshiri's reign a lot. That's a podcast in itself. But disappointed for him in a sense, or that it's never been able to work out for Farhad? I
mean, I'm not disappointed for him that he's going or anything like that. I do think that trying to understand and sum up Farhad Moshiri's legacy at Everton is a very complex challenge. And I do think that whilst ultimately he has spent hundreds of millions of pounds to take this club backwards and to effectively take this club to the very brink, both financially, both in terms of the Premier League, in terms of the relationship with the fan base, I don't think that he came into this with the wrong intentions. I think the lack of a plan was a big problem, and the way in which he was so heavily influenced by outside actors was a big problem. So, and the twin ambition of trying to build a squad for European football and the new stadium at the same time was, well, without a proper plan, was clearly problematic, and we've seen the consequences of that over recent seasons. But I don't think he came into this, and we have seen other owners come into the Premier League and do this to clubs. I don't think his plan was to come in here and extract fortunes from the club at the expense of it. I think his intentions were largely good. But obviously his oversight and his attempt to realise them was absolutely appalling. And I think, one of the pieces I've written had published this morning, my comment piece on this is a piece basically saying about how, the story to me of Fahad Moshiri's Everton is one in which the fans proved that they are more powerful than a billionaire's checkbook, which is the line that I used, because for all the hundreds of £1 he's spent, he's taken the club backwards. And the reality is that there have been so many grim moments, particularly over the last 3 years. You think back to the season that ended in Palace under Lampard, when you had the coach welcomes, Chelsea, Palace, and Leicester going away to Leicester and things like that. You think of the way in which the club rallied for the relegation campaign that ended in Bournemouth. You think of the way the fans rallied last season in the face of the points deductions. Really, the fact that he's only got into something that's worth selling, and really the only reason the Friedkin see in Everton something that's worth investing in is because ultimately I think the fans are what pulled Everton from the brink of the abyss several times over the last few years.
I mean, Matt, I don't want to dwell on Moshiri too much, but at the end of the day, he was probably one of the main catalysts for what is going to be, a fantastic new stadium on the waterfront. So, Joe's just discussed there the terrible decisions that he's made over the years. But how do you think he'll be remembered over the next couple of years? Maybe decades into the future, I guess. This period's been, tumultuous at best, but we're going to have a brand new stadium out of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't think it's like a homogenous thing with regards to the football and the stadium. I think you put them in two completely different boxes, can't you? And Joe's just outlined there so many of the reasons why on the football front that this was a catastrophic failure from Farhad Moshiri's point of view. I don't think necessarily his intentions were bad in any way, shape or form. I just think he was misguided. A lot of decisions he made were badly informed. But if you can, which you probably can't, but if you can, put all that in one box and leave to the side, all the football stuff, and then if you get all the stadium stuff out in another box and examine that, then it's been largely good, hasn't it? I think everybody watching this, I imagine, will be excited by what's going on down on Bramley Moordock. I've got excited in the last few weeks when the season ticket sale dates will come out. Obviously, we've got the prices now, and speaking to my dad about where we're going to sit in the new ground, it's suddenly starting to feel real, and like I've started to get those butterflies for the first time, I think, and I suppose that will be a longer lasting legacy, won't it, than the Vitor Pereira phone calls or the notes to Jim White and stuff like that. They will fade away with time. I suppose they are still. They were years ago, but they still feel quite raw now when you look back. And obviously, we've been talking about them a lot over the last few weeks. But that stadium's going to be there for how long's Goodison Park been there? Over 100 years. It's going to be a centrepiece in the city. So it's complicated, I think, isn't it? I think that's the best way to sum it up, because
complicated breakup type of
thing.
It
is. Yeah. What did it used to be on Facebook? It's complicated, was it? The relationship status or whatever. Yeah. But I think it's not. I don't think you can look at this now and say it's been a success, even with the stadium. The stadium will have a longer term impact, obviously, which I'm sure we'll come on to. It's probably one of the reasons why the Friedkins came back to the table and saw Everton as such a good opportunity. But from a footballing point of view, it's been such a disaster. It's been so calamitous. It's been quite shoddy at times as well. And I think the way in which Moshiri did things and the way he conducted himself probably damaged Everton's reputation to a certain extent. So I don't think because of that you can say in any way that his legacy is going to be good. Maybe, when we're all old and grey and we're taking our
close to it, like.
Well, the last 8 years have probably pushed us closer, haven't they? But when we're all taking our grandkids to Bramley Moor and Everton are, flying high in the Champions League or whatever weird Super League they've got in 50 years' time, we can say, do you know what? Actually, this is a good thing. But I don't think we can say that right now because it still feels like we're living through the consequences of Moshiri's catastrophic footballing decisions.
I mean, I guess he's not the only one who's contributed certainly his money to the football club or the stadium. I mean, even the Friedkins have already contributed £200 million as well, which I'm sure some of that money, if not all of it, has gone to the finalising the construction of the stadium as well. So,
it feels like, sorry to interrupt you, it feels like different operations, doesn't it? It feels like a lot of the, I mean, Joe might know more about this than I do, but it feels like the stuff going on around the stadium is mainly based out of the Liverpool offices, the Liver building. Colin Chong's obviously been overseeing a lot of that, hasn't he? And he's kind of been thrust into a few different roles, hasn't he, as well, since he's come into the football club, and that feels like it's a bit of a different operation to the football side of things, and maybe not quite as much been driven by Moshiri down the years. It's probably been more Liverpool based, more Liver building based than compared to some of the other aspects of the football club.
I mean, Joe, there's so much that we could probably get through today, which we're not going to be able to do, because there's just going to be so much that you guys are going to bring on the website and stuff. I guess first order of business then, what is that going to be? I guess the first order of business that has already been put out there is the new executive chairman, Mark Watts.
Yeah, well, the new board is the first one.
Yeah.
They have made immediate changes. The board was always going to go. Obviously, Fard Moshiri was on it, as was John Spellman, who was a trusted long-term Moshiri ally, and there was obviously going to be no place for him in the future Everton setup. So coming in, Dan Friedkin, the big man himself, is going to be chair, but the club's operation is going to be open.
Sorry to interrupt. The big man.
The big man.
Love it.
He's going to be chair, but the club's going to be run essentially by another Friedkin figure, which is Mark Watts. He's going to be the executive chairman. He's the one who's going to oversee the operation. Anna Dunkel, who's the Friedkin's chief finance officer, she's going to be on the board as well. And then Colin Chong is retaining his place as interim CEO for the time being. They are looking to finalise a deal for a permanent CEO. But for the minute, Colin remains on the board. And I think obviously we just mentioned him there. I think that we've spent an awful lot of time over the last few years, rightly criticising and offering scrutiny on senior figures at Everton who have perhaps fallen short in their roles and in the delivery of the ambitions that we and the club all wanted them to oversee. I think Colin Chong, we only know a fraction of what goes on inside that club, but I think that from what we can see, he is someone that deserves a huge amount of credit for having steered the club through choppy waters in the last 18 months, since those board changes. I mean, if ever you wanted just one summary of the Moshiri, the board changes that was the club said would take 48 hours, but then took 2 weeks to appoint an interim board that lasted 18 months. I mean, but during those 18 months, everything that has been good about the club, I think, has probably had the fingerprints of Colin Chong on it. So he deserves credit. He will be staying on in that role, and I think it's clear that the Friedkins place a degree of value in the institutional knowledge that he has. Somebody that knows the skeletons of the club, somebody who's been through all the PSR hearings, everything else, so much correspondence and interaction with the Premier League over recent years that they will need to kind of, whatever the Friedkins want to do going forward, they will need to draw upon that history of interaction with the Premier League and with other kind of stakeholders and all sorts of other, and Lango Rourke and all sorts of other people. So, board was the big change, and obviously they've made changes immediately. Beyond that, I expect that we'll probably see a little bit of a period, a little bit of a lull from now on, where they'll get their feet under the carpet. Obviously, they've been in and around the club for a long time. They've been planning this for a long time. They've had thoughts on how they're going to operate. I think with Kevin Farwell and Sean Dyche, they have very, very big decisions to make. I think Kevin Farwell's future is a priority as CEO. Both their contracts are out in the summer, so they are naturally going to warrant a lot of attention. But right now, for the minute, I think they are very, very aware that Everton is still in a battle this season, and the position for the club, whilst they've been waiting for this takeover, been in a paralysis, very much been a case of they'll do everything they can to try and maintain stability in the dugout. Sean Dyche is someone whose track record is keeping Everton up in difficult circumstances twice already. Didn't really want to change him again, and I imagine that will be the preference for the time being. They're going to have this conversations at Finch Farm with farewell with Dyche, see how things go on the football operation. But if they can leave it for a little bit, they probably will. That is what they did at Roma. At Roma, they took over in the August of 2020, and one of their first major acts was to appoint Jose Mourinho. Imagine an appointment that came out of the blue. But it was the spring of the following year that they did that. They looked at everything first before they acted. And I think for so many reasons that probably makes sense for them to do the same here, unless I'd say there's probably two circumstances in which Dyche's position comes under threat. One is if results get to the point where it looks like he can't keep Everton in the Premier League. Of course, the Friedkin's going to protect their investment. That's why the win over Wolves was so big. It created that gap. If Wolves had beaten Everton, and Everton would have been in the bottom three and in crisis, and then they'd have had a difficult decision to make. That didn't happen, and obviously the point against Arsenal was very valuable. The other thing that I think is probably we won't hear too much on this, but something I've written about in some of my coverage today is I think the Friedkins will obviously have a plan for what they want at Everton. They are people who have been involved in football for a long time. There is a project here for them, and they will have in mind people they want to lead that project. I think that where Everton or where Sean Dyche could come under a little bit more peril than may be obvious is that there are a fair few clubs in the Premier League that are struggling at the minute, and a fair few managers at clubs that you might argue are in a better financial and squad position than Everton. I'm not thinking of the likes of Wolves and Southampton here. I'm thinking of West Ham and Spurs. If they were to end up in a situation where they took action on managers, well, I wouldn't be surprised if they're fishing or at least looking in the same pools that the Friedkin might be looking for their long-term things. So they might end up in a difficult situation where they had to kind of, we don't want to bring him in now, but is this the best way of protecting the asset? And it's all just a mess. But I think for the time being, expect stability on that front.
I mean, a lot of people before Matt was suggesting, Friedkins are going to come in and bang, Dyche is going to go. Obviously, the season hasn't been fantastic. We had the 4-0 defeat to United. We've had, defeat to Southampton. But in a way, past couple of games kind of stopped the rot a little bit. 4-0 win at Wolves, obviously postponement of the derby, and then the draw at Arsenal as well. But does the takeover and the Friedkins coming in just naturally pile a little bit more pressure on Sean Dyche to get those results?
Well, yeah, it absolutely does, doesn't it? I think it gives everyone, well, there's accountability for everyone now, isn't it? It's not one of those, how many times have we spoken, in the office or on here or elsewhere, and spoken about players and the manager and said, well, nothing's going to happen because there's no one there. There's no one there to effectively do anything. And that kind of paralysis, to use the word that Joe said then, has been underscoring the club for a long time, and it's difficult, isn't it? And now all of a sudden you've got a manager there who knows he's going to have to perform. You've got players there who might want to stay, who know that they might be able to actually have contracts negotiated now properly over the next few weeks because there are people here who are going to be here beyond the end of the season. So yeah, I think it's just one of those, isn't it? It'll give everybody a bit of a kick, I think, from that point of view, and all of a sudden there's going to be more responsibility. But like Joe said, I think for me, like after 8 years, and 8 years which have largely been a circus, I think stability has got to be the key thing. And I think as much as they've come in, it's all been confirmed today. They will have been having conversations and forming opinions over the last few weeks. I'm absolutely sure of that. And I think if the situation was bad, I don't think there would have been any issue about them coming in and making changes straight away. But like Joe said again, that win over Wolves just gives everyone that little bit of breathing room, that little bit of calm. And I think after so long where there's been so much upheaval and so much change, like this is so different to 8 years ago, isn't it? Because 8 years ago, Moshiri came in and it felt like, right, this is going to be the big push on we need, and everyone got really excited and was dreaming big. I feel like now, if obviously everyone's very relieved today and the announcements come through and everyone's dead happy, but if there's like a bit of calm and a bit of a lull and nothing happened for a few weeks and we just ticked along all right on the pitch, Dyche stayed, and we were just thinking ahead to the summer of being a Premier League team, I feel like everyone would be fine with that. Like you don't, the statement today didn't really come with like big bells and whistles on. There's not been like a big lavish announcement. There's no like press conference planned or anything like that. I'm fine with that. Like I don't want it to be a big massive thing that we've got new owners in an ideal world. I don't want to be hearing from them all the time and making big promises. I know they've sort of got to come in today and say things, but if Everton can just tick along to the end of the season, Dyche stays to the end of the season, and then we can make a decision on him, we can make a decision on Kevin Farwell after we've got 5-6 more months of data to look at and evidence to go through, then I think it leaves us in a much better position. But obviously that depends entirely on us getting results and staying in that situation. So yeah, I think they will be desperate for calm and composure after so long. And I think it's one of those where maybe, as certainly speaks for myself as a supporter, I'm quite happy with that. I don't want big appointments and big gestures quite yet. I'm happy for them to just come in and take the temperature for the time being and sort of see what's what.
I mean, it's not going to get any easier for Sean Dyche over the next 3 games. I'm sure he'll be desperate to make a good impression. Chelsea coming up, then City and then Forest. It's not going to be an easy game, is it? So how many points really do you think he's going to have to take to make that good impression on the Friedkins? I mean, don't get me wrong, they're obviously seeing what's going on. It's not like they haven't seen that. It's slightly a little bit unfair on Sean Dyche that like the takeovers happen now and then it's like, well, you've got Chelsea, you've got City, and you've got Forest, and the pressure's already on you. The pressure has, for me, is heaped on a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not someone that's going to sit here and say that it's unfair on Sean Dyche at this stage, because I think the reality is that, look, talking about Sean Dyche's role here is complex, and we know it's a divisive issue. For me, Sean Dyche has pulled Everton, obviously the fans started this by saying that they were key, but when at some point in the future, hopefully the Friedkins will bring the stability, which then provides the platform for us to go on and have big success. And I think that at that point, once water's passed on the bridge a little bit, everyone will look back on the Sean Dyche era and go, yeah, okay, there might have been some hard moments and it might be a difficult watch at times, but ultimately Everton don't get the success of the future without him having helped to save the past or the present when he came in. And I think he deserves a lot of credit and recognition for that. Obviously, there are big issues about whether or not he can take the club forward. And I think we've already seen some of the challenges that he might struggle at this season already, where he's been given a few more options offensively and hasn't quite been able to manage that transition. I think that's probably telling about his future going forward. But whilst I think that at this stage he should have a positive reputation at Everton, I also think that if Everton had been a normal club for the past 2 years, there's every chance he may well have been dismissed twice.
Yeah.
I don't think any manager survives the Premier League record winless streak without the context that he was operating in. And even with that, if there was somebody that was, if there was more stability at the top of the club, you'd expect him to have made a change. And then this season has been, it's been a really underwhelming start to the season. Even he's accepted that to some extent. Where he can kick on from now, we'll have to wait and see. Now he's got players back from injury and might have a chance to to progress going, to strengthen the squad a little bit in January. So, it's a really interesting one. Obviously, the Friedkins were seeing what he's doing. I mean, they've been interested in Everton for 6 months, because obviously that was the first deal that fell apart during pre-season. So they'll have been watching it. They haven't really had any conversations with him. I think it's been quite clear in some of the press conferences he's had a bit of frustration around that. It's going to be interesting to see what impression he makes. But I think that, again, for him, it's probably less about how many points Everton get over the next few weeks. I think it has to be an acceptance. They've got a challenging fixture. It's February till Everton have a game that will go into his favourites. Perhaps with the exception of Forest. If Forest's form was to dip in the next fortnight, then Everton might go into favourites for that game on the 29th. But other than that, because January's Bournemouth away, it's Brighton, it's Villa, it's Spurs, and obviously got the FA Cup as well. So it's going to be a test. I think it's less about the points on the board and more, the performances of Everton. If they were to struggle to pick up points, but to continue to play in the manner in which they did against Arsenal, where, okay, Jordan Pickford made some big saves and there was very little attacking threat, and that was frustrating. Ultimately, they went there and Dyche probably did the best he could do with that squad. They got a really good point, kept a clean sheet at one of the best teams in Europe, one of the best teams in the world. If he can, even if they would fall on the wrong side of results, but carry on doing that against City and Chelsea, then I think he would deserve credit. Probably the big thing to look out for is Wolves and Ipswich. I think that's the context with which he'll be judged in. If they close the gap. Leicester have got a new manager in. Palace moved above Everton with their win at the weekend. Ipswich obviously beat Wolves to move within 3 points of Everton. So will they get a little bit of momentum from that? And Wolves have got a new manager. And I think probably the fear for all of us when we've been judging the start of the season negatively has been the fear that Wolves and Palace have have some better players than Everton and are in a false position where they start to pull clear and Everton get dragged down into the relegation fight again. I think that's where Sean Dyche is under most threat if it looks like he can't do the one thing that he's always been able to deliver. That's keep Everton in the Premier League.
I think just following on from that, I think as much as we can sit here before we played these games and before we've had this tough run and preach stability, the evidence is there with the Friedkin Group that if things aren't going well with the manager, they will act. We haven't got any evidence of what whether it's going to be different at Everton, whether they've got different expectations, all these things. But going off what they've done at Roma, when they felt like a change needs to be made, they've been pretty ruthless, haven't they? They haven't really given it too much time, and they've acted. So I think it's almost like I said this at the start of the season when you go into go back ahead of the season. I was looking ahead thinking, if we have a tough run, let's all be patient. Let's all calm down. Dyche had a bad run last year and he pulled us out of it. And it's easy to sit there before you've played any games, before the season started, when you're not living through those moments and say, we're going to be calm, we're going to be patient. It's a lot different when you're in it and you're in that cycle and you're looking at the table and, as much as we've turned I don't think we turned the corner, that's the wrong phrase to use. As much as we've picked up a little bit over the last 2 games, we're still only 3 points above the relegation zone going into a really tough run of games against, one of the best teams in the league this weekend, City away on Boxing Day. So it could all change really quickly. And I think, stability is fine now, but if Everton fall into the bottom 3 in January the 1st and you've got, a chance to bring in new players and improve the squad, maybe for a different sort of manager, then you wouldn't put it past them acting then. So I think the onus is ultimately this. They come in today and a lot of talk about the Friedkin Group, what they might do. I think the onus is really on Dyche and getting his team and his players improving and picking up points again and just keeping out of that relegation zone. Because I think if he can, then he'll probably keep his job until the end of the season. But if we fall further down, I just think because the fact that they're new to all this, the Friedkins, it don't really strike me as people who are going to just wait and see based on what's going on at Roma.
Do you think, just on that then, because it's a really interesting point that you mentioned how ruthless they've kind of been at Roma. I think it's clear that they've done some good things, but they've probably made a couple of mistakes as well. It's not for me to say whether sacking De Rossi or any other manager was the right or wrong decision or whatsoever, but quite clearly they're not in a good place, and I think it probably stems from maybe not having a plan and not bringing the right people in for the start. Do you think that could, the experience that they've had then at doing that over the past couple of years at Roma, do you think that could benefit Sean Dyche, that they won't want to just jump in straight away and just be like, well, we all know it's about results. I think as Joe's mentioned there, and you've just said the same, if results dip, if the league form and we drop down the table, there's massive concern. But do you think effectively they're going to be speaking to people within inside the club? We'll come on to Kevin Thelwell in a minute, but they're going to obviously take advice from that. They're not going to just jump in straight away and sack the manager.
It depends how bad the situation gets, doesn't it? They're not going to want their investment to go into the Championship in the first year of coming in. They bought Everton because they're a Premier League club with loads of benefits of a new stadium and all that kind of thing. So they're going to want to protect their asset, and it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think from Dyche's point of view, if we'd won 1 or 2 more games and we were that extra bit further clear of the relegation zone, I don't think there'd be any conversations about this at all. But in the same breath, we are where we are, and I think there's a reality to sort of to talk about here, that if Everton fall into the relegation zone, then we could be in big trouble, and they might have to act. It might not be the stability, calm, composed start they want to life at Everton, but they have been decisive before, so it wouldn't surprise me at all. But listen, hopefully it doesn't come to that. I think Goodison's going to be great on Sunday, isn't it? It's going to be. I think it'd be an interesting atmosphere. Obviously, everyone will be up for it. Chelsea have got a terrible record. You just don't know. And I think the one thing you can say about Dyche, and going back to what I was saying earlier about how he's had bad runs before and turned it around, is that just when you think it's just completely spiraled out of control and there's no way back, then he has been able to turn it around. And I imagine for him, there might be a sense of relief with this takeover coming in for the players, for everyone who's working at Finch Farm day to day. So hopefully that mood will transmit into the squad, and we can pick things up. So yeah, try and look more positive. I'm going to try and look more positively on this first day of the new era. Yeah.
it's definitely better for everybody if Dyche is if the conditions are such that Dyche can stay. By that I mean obviously Everton pick up the wins and the results needed for him to be able to kind of, and the Friedkins can just get their feet under the table first. I mean, another thing that'll be interesting in January is obviously if you were to look at getting rid of Sean Dyche for whatever reason, is the PSR implications. It would it would involve a payout to Sean and his staff that would go on to this current 12 months books, and that might be the difference between, a loan fee for. Well, I mean, I'm not sure they've got any loan spots left, actually. I've lost count of where they are. Could be the difference between, signing in January. Because obviously, if you were to buy a £15 million player over 5 years, it's only £3 million on the books for this year, isn't it? So, the couple £1 million that might cost in payoffs might be the difference between that and, putting down a deposit on a player who could come in and improve the playing squad. Because I think we can all see that it's got some holes in it.
And as well, I think I'm no like huge advocate for Sean Dyche by any means, but I totally agree with Joe. And I think that there's so many other knock-on implications of that. So if he was to go, say Everton to lose the next 3 games and he was to be sacked in January, then all of a sudden that in turn has a knock-on effect to what you do with the director of football as well. So maybe the Friedkins are coming in and saying, well, we don't want to, we're not quite sure about Kevin Farwell. We'll get our feet on the desk. We'll wait until see to the end of the season, and we'll give him a bit of a test run. If you feel like you've got to sack the manager, then you've got to go to the director of football, who in turn has got to put his candidates across, and you might not be sure about the director of football and what he thinks as well. So it just means that, in an ideal world, both of them stay in situ, I think, to the end of the season, and in the background you've got, people who know loads about football, hopefully working on who's going to be our next long-term manager. Is it Dyche or not? Who's going to be our next long-term director of football? Is it Kevin Farwell or not? And you take that time to get it all in place for the start of next season. I think if you're doing things on the hoof a little bit midway through, I mean, that's how we ended up with Sean Dyche, isn't it, to begin with? Like, that's the cycle that Everton have been trapped in for so long. So I think as much as this is the first day of a new era and an exciting new era, we're all feeling very positive, I think there are some aspects, certainly the footballing side, that you'd want them to come in and really take a proper, granular look at. And if you're sacking the manager 3 weeks, 4 weeks into your tenure, and go to a director of football, you might not be sure about what he thinks about a new manager or going forward. Or even if you don't go into it, you're potentially making him a bit of a spare part. It just complicates matters so much, I think. So ideally, stability for the next few months.
And
certainly.
you have a problem as well, is if you try to bring in a new manager and it's a relegation battle, they'll be left with a choice. Do they bring in another short-term firefighter, which, like you say, is what Dyche was, and is there anyone better than Dyche in this, who's got a track record of this Everton setup? But you also have the problem of, well, if you've identified, and I think conversations have taken place around names for managing roles potentially in the future under the Friedkins at Everton, but it's a very, very different job coming in January with Everton in the bottom 3 on a bad run of form with more tough fixtures to come, compared to in the summer when you've got a complete overhaul of the playing staff, the goodwill of moving into a new stadium and a fresh slate in front of you. The Friedkins will likely want a project manager, someone whose vision they share, and they can back and try and transform Everton over several years. That's what they will ideally want. Yeah. The danger is if you move early on, you feel like you end up being moved to move early on, that you bring them into a situation where they're in a firefight already. They're already under pressure, and they might be in a situation where they're gone before they've even had a chance to put the foundations in place, and then you ruin the whole vision that they've been working on for months. So, I mean, it's obvious, but the best thing for Everton is best thing for all of us is Everton just carry on picking up enough points to stay away from trouble, and we just have a period of calm where sensible decisions can be made, away from the pressures of another dogfight.
Sorry. Ian.
No,
go on. It's one of them. It's like say if Everton, I don't know if this is not like any inside information, but say if Everton want Thomas Frank as the next manager, and they said, right, he's the fellow we want going forward. What's the best way of getting him? It's not. I don't think it's sacking Dyche now and going to Brentford and saying, come and be our manager, because he wouldn't leave mid-season, would he? And I think if they want someone who's in work, they're not going to get them in January. So if Everton was to get rid of Dyche and say they went for, again, based on nothing, just a name plucking out of anywhere, David Moyes, and went to Moyes, said, right, come in, we'll give you an 18-month deal, and you'll be the first manager of Brownlee Moore, and you get to the end of the season, you think, we want somebody else, actually. We're not really sure about
Well,
this.
how many times have we been there?
Exactly. And then you potentially have to stick with a manager you don't think is your long-term solution, or you have to sack them and pay them off. And then you've got a third manager in the space of, 6 or 7 months. So I think it's just about, as much as we're here, and it's like the very start, this bright, exciting new era, off the pitch is going to be, there's loads of appointments today, loads of new people we're learning about. On the pitch, it still feels like it's, maybe stall's not the right word, but it's in slow motion a little bit. It's just about getting to the end of the season before hopefully the football operation side of the football club can get really refreshed and change going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are live, so continue to submit your comments and I'll read some out. Well, I'll read some. I will read some out. But I just wanted to while we're on this subject of people's futures, there's so many moving parts, there's so many subplots to this situation. Obviously, reports this week suggesting that the Friedkins are also going to retain Kevin Thelwell as director of football. We know his contract runs out in the summer, but for me, it's just going to be dependent on how. It's all speculation because we don't know how results going to go over the next couple of weeks. But I'm really interested in Kevin Thelwell's position and his thoughts on all this. As far as we know, or as far as I know, he's a close ally of Sean Dyche. I don't know whether that's changed over the past couple of weeks or months, but we don't know if even Kevin Thelwell would like to stay beyond his current contract.
Well, yeah, I mean, Kevin Thelwell would like to stay.
Well, no. So my point being, he's gonna look to want to continue on. He's going to want to look to impress. All the usual things when your new boss comes in, when the new owners come in as well. So it's just the whole dynamic could completely change now over the next couple of weeks if results start to slip. Fantastic, as Matt says. If it doesn't, if we keep churning out points, which is obviously going to be small amounts of points over the next couple of weeks because of the games that we've got coming up, that's probably what's going to happen. We need enough points to stay in the league. That's obvious, but I just find it so interesting, the dynamic and how things could spiral in a way. Yeah,
well, the dynamic for Kevin Thelwell will change automatically regardless of results because he has, from January, 13. Well, obviously some of these are loan players, but Everton have a senior squad of 25 players and 13 of those are currently due to leave the club in the summer. And from January the 1st, those of them who are under contract at Everton, so not the loanee players, can all sign pre-contract deals with clubs from outside of the country. And conversations with some of the players have already started. There are European clubs eyeing up the likes of Michael Keane and people like that. So Thelwell's got a big job on his hand. Obviously, he's not been able to do anything in relation to this because he's had no certainty or stability above him. He doesn't know what his budgets are going to be. He doesn't even know if he's going to be the person that's making those calls in the first place. He doesn't know what the new vision for the football operation is going to be that will, even if only temporarily, have to enact. I think that Kevin Thelwell is someone I think who wants to stay on at Everton. I think he, certainly Dyche at the beginning of the Friedkins' push for the club, I think they would see it almost as their reward of having steered the club through the mess of the last few years in very, very difficult circumstances, because they both have been working in very, very difficult circumstances. I think they would see a reward for that being the people that would lead the club in senior positions going into the new stadium. So that's all really interesting. I think I also think it's possible to separate Dyche and Thelwell. I don't think they come as a package. I think that when you perhaps look at some of the things that Everton have done, rather than the words that have been said about relationships and things like that, friction would be too strong a word, but I don't think it would be too controversial to say it looks like there's been some slightly competing ideologies that are being at play at Finch Farm. I think when you look at the signings that were made in the summer, and the way in which Sean Dyche has used them, there seems to be a bit of a conflict there. I don't think that Illiman Ndiaye is brought to play as a left winger, and there are a few other roles where we could kind of make similar claims. So I think you can separate them. I don't think that their future is necessarily entwined. I think the Thelwell call is the biggest one of the lot from the football side of operations because of the transition that's going to unfold now, and obviously that includes the playing staff. He is somebody that has already planned or drafted up ideas for this January and the following summer as well. He has a forward vision of what transfer windows could potentially look like. Obviously, he's now got to convince the new owners to share in his vision. But he will have a very busy time right now, because right now he'll be finding out what the plan is. And it's very interesting to see how those conversations will go down. How do you go about building a squad for the first year at Bramley Moor if you don't necessarily know who the manager's going to be, or if you're going to be the CEO, the director of football. So I think that in a similar way to the way in which Colin Chong is being kept on the board for now, I can see a lot of logic in keeping Kevin Fowler in post, and if that requires giving him a bit of an extension to give him that certainty, so he can work without having the pressure of growing of my contract's up in 6-5, 4-3, and I've got this website and this website saying I haven't look at this person and that person. I can just carry on. I do think there'll be some value, even though I think that we would all say that it's very difficult to assess what he's done at the club so far. On the one hand, he's had to work in incredibly difficult circumstances. He's had no money, barely any influence, no leadership above him. So, how difficult must that be to work? But in the same respect, that also makes it very difficult to properly scrutinise his decisions, because there have been some decisions that haven't worked out. I think it's fair to say. So, but I think what they might look to do is retain that institutional knowledge again, having a figurehead in different parts of the operation that have seen and gone through everything that's gone on in the past and has those relationships already and can act as a bridge to the future. I think there's probably a fair degree of sense in that, isn't there? I think, you don't want to... Everton's squad is going to go through such huge change in the summer, and that could be a big positive. But it would also be it's also a massive risk if work doesn't immediately start on trying to plan for it. So you either need to change him straight away, or you probably need to back him, because having him start to negotiate all the contracts and maybe a new sign or two in January, then having someone else come in and take over with a different vision in March, I mean, that's a mess, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, interesting point, Matt, with what Joe just said there, because I said on the show last week or the week before, and Chris Beasley did disagree with me to an extent, the director of football, whether that's retaining Kevin Thirlwell or getting a new person in, is the most important decision at the club. It's more important than the new manager, in a way.
Yeah. I'd say that and the CEO, for me, are the two, because they are the two people who should really direct things from a footballing perspective, in the case of the director of football, and off the pitch in the case of the CEO. And I think that the director of football, I feel like Everton have never got it right ever since they tried to start it. Obviously, they had Steve Walsh, who came in as director of football, who's never a director of football before. Marcel Brands came in and was kind of undermined and then was put on the board weirdly. And Kevin Thelwell now, it's, to go back to something Joe said there, I know transfers isn't entirely his role, like he does much more than just recruitment, but like Joe's right in regards to some of the players that we've brought in and the way in which the managers played them. And I don't think that Thelwell's idea of football or how Everton should play is necessarily in line with what Dyche and how he plays it all. So it always feels like it's been like a bit of a bastardised version of the director of football at Everton. They've never quite got it right. And
do we need a director of football?
I think we do. I think because we've not done it right doesn't mean necessarily we don't need one. And I think you've seen examples, certainly in the modern game, how it can work really well. Because certainly in the case of modern football, where you change managers a lot, if you've got that one person who sort of oversees it all, who can get their ideas across and can have that common thread running through, then the amount of instability that could come from changes in playing staff and changes in manager would be lessened, because you've got that one person who's got an idea. But to be honest, I know Thelwell's done a few bits with the club and a few bits of media. I don't know what his vision is. Like, even when he's spoken about them, his ideas in the past, I don't think he's ever really got it across well. I think it's been like not entirely convincing. If he's different, might be a little bit different behind closed doors. I don't know. So I don't really know what he's trying to do or what the aim is. But again, the circumstances have been tough, and as much as we can go through players that we've signed, they've not worked out. Someone like Beto, there's context there, isn't there? Everton only signed him because they had to pay nothing up front, and maybe in a different set of circumstances where you've got more money to go in up front, you can go and get somebody a little bit better. So it all comes with massive context. But I think I do understand the merits of potentially keeping him around for a little bit longer, despite some of those concerns, because it's not just signings that he makes. I think that he's obviously got a hand in the academy. He's got a hand in a lot of stuff going on at the football club that's not really glamorous to talk about. And I think as much as I don't mind necessarily potentially a new manager, certainly new players coming in, I think maybe having a thread of continuity is going to be quite important. I think that as much as I'm all for a fresh start and clearing a lot of the decks, I think you kind of need someone there to guide you through that process. And as much as not entirely convinced by him, I think he's done a decent job in trying circumstances. So I kind of would get the merit of keeping him on board.
I think you've just answered Roy Nixon's question there, who says, overall, what do you think of Kevin Thelwell and the job that he has done? I know he hasn't had much money, but there is zero pace in the team and £26 million for Beto, which you've kind of touched upon a little bit as well. I think with the director of football situation, and kind of repeat myself from what I said last week, but if we were to bring in a manager who was successful over a number of, say, 2 or 3 seasons, you would ultimately, another team bigger would probably come in and try and take that manager. I don't think Everton are in a situation right now where they can keep hold of a manager. We've seen it happen in the past, so we need to set up like a Brighton, where a director of football, sporting director, whatever you want to label it, who has the infrastructure in place, knows the style of football, knows the philosophy, knows what players is going to come in each window, knows how much money we've got, and then there's a list of managers. If this manager goes, we know who we're going to bring in next. Even then, if that manager goes, we know who we're going to bring in next. Unfortunately, that is the model I feel that we need to follow. I mean, you guys seem to be agreeing. I'd love it if we were to bring in a world-class manager and it would just work out. But, I just think director of football, it's so important that we get this right.
I think you're absolutely spot on. I think it's probably quite instructive at this point to kind of look at what's gone on at Roma, and they've gone through 4 managers this calendar year, so they haven't got the Friedkins haven't got a solution to everything, and they haven't not made mistakes either. They're not infallible, but in the aftermath of the really controversial sacking with De Rossi back in September, the one that sparked the fan protests, everything else, got rid of a club legend, having backed him in the summer, so they've had their fingers burnt there a little bit, but they don't communicate a lot. Their operations don't communicate a lot. But the sporting director there, Florent Gasolfi, came out and basically, I think they were in a position where they were forced to kind of provide a little bit of insight into their plans, and it was very much that. He was talking about, look, might not got everything right here, but what we need to try and do is, he was saying that at Roma they need to try and create a structure which doesn't, that isn't subject to the mood swings that happen as managers go in and out. The worst thing, the most damaging thing of the football-wise, the Moshiri era, is that he would chop and change between managers and director of football, and you would ended up basically you'd violently pivot from one to the other to one day ideology. And look at the squad now; it's a Frankenstein squad of different managers and directors of football's ambitions and ideas for how football should be played. So it's clear at Roma they're trying to move away from that. I think that probably represents a degree of progress in their learning about managing football clubs, because I don't know what their vision was when they first went in there, other than what they said in their statements to the club. But hiring Jose Mourinho doesn't stand out to anybody. We all know that he is not a project manager that you kind of build towards a future with. He's someone you come in to win your silverware now, and he did, in fairness. He got the Europa Conference League. So it sounds like there's been a little bit of a maturing of their viewpoint there, and you would imagine that they would apply the same to here. A lot of the things that they're saying about in terms of what they want for the club, it's sustainability, it's professionalism, it's strategic investment in the playing squad, it is building the academy up, and it's quite interesting because a lot of that chimes with what Kevin Fowler has been trying to do at Everton, putting faith in the academy, and obviously he had a 120-point plan, I think, 18 months ago, and he's still working through that. I know that we all have management sound bites and TED Talks and things like that. Yeah. So, I mean, there's been so much, hasn't there? But, he is someone that is already in the process of trying to implement a strategy and a vision that perhaps chimes with what the Friedkins probably want to do. They've just got to come in now and assess it and see, are you aiming for the right things? Are you doing it in the right way? Do we think that your vision is one that we can buy into? Because if it isn't, and we've got a separate vision, then they probably need to go somewhere else.
Yeah. One other thing I'd say in his defence as well is that, can you really ever be a director of football in its real form working at Moshiri's Everton? Because we've heard from Marcel Brands, haven't we, in interviews since he left the football club, about how he was undermined in regards to wanting to sign players. He wanted to keep managers. I think Silva was the one he said he wanted to keep, and obviously he was overruled in that instance. And I think maybe at Everton, because Moshiri was so keen on getting involved in players coming in, players going out, managers being sacked, managers they were bringing in, the director of football's kind of undermined a little bit in the sense of the role. And I think, since Farewell's been here, the managers have been Lampard. Did he come in when Lampard was manager? Yeah. And obviously we've had Dyche as well. They're obviously two different ends of the spectrum in regards to approach, style of football. And I think that says one or two things to me. The first one is that Farewell's ideologies are a little bit all over the place if he's been involved in both of those selections, which I doubt.
I would say on the Dyche appointment, though, it was probably a needs-must appointment.
Exactly.
It wasn't like this is an expansive, great managerial appointment. No offence to Sean Dyche at the time, because he come in and kept us up twice. But it was like, we need a firefighter manager here to keep us up, wasn't it?
Yeah, but he's still here.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, if Farewell had a vision beyond that, then maybe Dyche would have been let go at the end of that first season. I don't know, but it feels like those conflicting ideologies with those two managers and the players we've brought a little bit says to me a little bit that the Farewell's maybe not got or didn't certainly a few years ago have a huge amount of responsibility when it comes to selecting them. It feels like Moshiri, up until potentially Dyche, was the one who was driving those appointments. So, and I think that Joe mentioned what goes on with Roma. I think the sporting director or director of football, whatever you want to call them, have a much more hands-on role, I think, in regards to responsibility for hiring, firing, and signing players. Even speaking to the media, from like you mentioned there. So, I think that the director of football, certainly on the continent, is a lot more has a lot more responsibility than they do here. So maybe Farewell will feel like with that extra responsibility, you might get under the Friedkins working in Serie, the model they've got in Serie A. You might be able to thrive a little bit more with a little bit more money, with better financial footing. You might be able to make his case that he could do a lot better. So I imagine that will be his pitch when he has his meetings with the big man, as Joe called him, for the next few weeks.
Absolutely, the big man. I mean, that point kind of brings us nicely on to Paul Roberts' question. Joe, I'll come to you on this. There's a lot made over the years with regards to interference, if you want to use that word, from Farhad Moshiri. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because how can an owner interfere in his own company? Do you know what I mean? But you get it, though. You understand, don't you? So basically the question is, after Moshiri's reign, do we know if the new owners will let people get on with managing the team and not interfere and undermine according to their own impulses and whims? It's a really good question, because...
It's a good question, yeah. I think the answer's pretty straightforward. I think that one of the things it's clear the Friedkins like to do is they like to empower football people to make the footballing decisions. That's why, like Matt just said a minute ago, the appointment of the CEO is going to be so important, because obviously, Mark Watts is going to oversee the management of the club on behalf of the Friedkins, but he's clearly not a footballing person. So that CEO is going to drive the football side of the vision. That's going to be a huge appointment, and yeah, their track record, I think they say, is very much a case of we'll stay out of the football decisions. We'll empower. What we'll do is we'll try and identify the best talent that we can find to make those decisions, and then back them.
Well, I'll be honest. I feel like we could talk all day, but we all know that we've got other things and pressing things to do. So we'll finish off, which is just about 55 minutes. I guess we'll finish off on final thoughts. Are they going to be as representatives, or is Dan Friedkin going to be?
Yeah, they're going to have a presence. The Friedkins will have a presence at Goodison Park on Sunday. Farhad Moshiri is someone that wants to come back to Goodison Park at some point in the near future. So
interesting.
His ambition is to be able to get to a game this season.
If he's checked his tenure and he's
that's it.
And get to the back of the queue for Farhad.
He'd like, as I've written, he'd like to see them play games in the new stadium as well. But I mean, it's some U-turn for a man who's barely been seen at his own club whilst he's owned it for so long. So
is this Premier League weekly Matchley stream going to be cut off now that he's no longer Everton owner?
Well, I'm
passed
sure
over to Dan, isn't it now?
Yeah, possibly.
How many signings? Like on Netflix, where you've got you have a limited amount of signings per account. Yeah.
So the Friedkins will have representatives at Goodison Park. I'm not entirely sure who yet. I don't think they've quite confirmed that with the club, but there will be a presence.
Cool. Matt, final thoughts? Obviously Chelsea
We always
on
smash
Sunday.
that at Goodison, don't we?
Are you going to be there?
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a prediction? Because I don't think you're going to be on tomorrow's
I think
show.
we've won 6 of the last 7 at Goodison against them, haven't we?
Yeah, done well.
Definitely 5 of the last 6.
It's something mad like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's... I don't think it's going to change loads on the pitch. I think the atmosphere will be great, obviously. There'll be relief just sitting down in your seat knowing the existential fear has gone away for now. I shouldn't say for now. It has gone away with the Friedkin Group, so that'll be nice. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe a draw. Manchester get a draw. I've been really impressed with them this season, and they've been so fun to watch. And I think away from home, particularly, they've been really good, haven't they? Scoring loads of goals. But I think boosted by a good atmosphere and some good performances recently, maybe we can sneak a 1-1 draw.
Absolutely. Sean Dyche press conference tomorrow as well.
1:30.
1:30 as well. Gav Buckland has reliably informed me that he's back in the country, so I think he's coming in for a pod tomorrow with me. So we'll probably talk a little bit of takeover, but we'll also primarily discuss Chelsea, team selection predictions, the usual stuff for that.
Get his book plugs one last time before Christmas.
Well, no one knows that he's got a book on.
It's boss, to be fair.
Yeah, give it a read.
Yeah, really good.
Good stuff. Okay, well, keep an eye out on the Liverpool Echo website for all the latest from Joe and Matt in the live blogs and Joe's articles. Plenty more to come. I mean, like I say, we could talk for days on end with regards to this, but pressing matters. Chelsea at the weekend on Sunday. Sean Dyche press conference tomorrow. Give us a like for this video as well and subscribe to the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. This show will be on Apple and Spotify as an audio podcast. So if you're only just joining and you'd rather give it a listen rather than a watch, then do so. Most importantly, enjoy the rest of your Thursday. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Joe Thomas and Matt Jones, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.